as a public defender in Wisconsin, specifically in Milwaukee, for the last 8 years now, since I graduated from law school. And how I got interested in it was I actually started as a public defender when I was in college, and found that really interesting.
Andrea, sorry to interrupt you, but you're breaking up a whole bunch right now, so maybe if you give your intro again.
Okay.
That sounds better.
Does that sound better?
That sounds a lot better.
Okay. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened there. So I've been working as a public defender since I graduated from law school almost years ago, and I started actually interested in work when I was in college. I worked as a public defender's office, which I found really interesting. And to law school, but as I worked,
I'm sorry, we're losing you again. I'm not sure. It may be on our end.
Yeah,
sometimes when classes start, the internet at Penn State gets bogged down a lot. So it seems only when I turn off my audio. So maybe if I leave my audio on right now and just try to be quiet, maybe it'll be clear. So why don't you give it one more shot?
Okay.
And see what happens. Because when I talk to you, it seems like it's clear. When I mute mine, then we have problems.
Okay. Let me just check one thing on my end and see. Because I did adjust something yesterday. Yeah, I think it's okay.
You're coming in fine now.
Okay. All right. Okay. So I started out with public defender's office. Oh, there's Alex. As an undergrad, and that got me interested in public defender work. So I went to law school thinking that I might be interested in doing public defender work when I got out, but I wasn't really totally committed to it until I got through law school. And what interested me most during law school, other than being a friend of Howie's, was I really enjoyed constitutional law. I really liked criminal procedure, and I really enjoyed the clinicals that I did in law school, in which we got to work with indigent clients in prison, and I really liked that client contact. So that's what really drew me to public defender work, as opposed to contracts or business or trust and estates, civil procedure, anything else. The constitutional aspect and the ability to be able to work with clients directly. And so I went into the trial office at Public Defender's Office in Milwaukee right out of law school, and that is where my colleague Alex and I met. We started at the same time, and I worked in our trial office for about 7 or 8 years, from misdemeanors, shoplifting, drunk drivings, through homicides. So every aspect of those type of cases. And then I switched to appellate work with the Public Defender's Office in about 1999. So I've been doing appellate work for the last 20 years. And in the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office, we have a trial division, and then we have an appellate division. So I now work in the appellate division. Alex stayed in our trial division, and he's done trial work exclusively for the last almost 30 years for you too, Alex. So what I find enjoyable about public defense work is really challenging, and it's really rewarding. So, the trial lawyers work in the trenches. They're fighting for the rights of clients on the ground level in justice, and we're protecting constitutional rights and dealing with constitutional issues every day in every case, from Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues to Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, process, and Sixth Amendment right to counsel, right to trial. And I find that all very intellectually challenging and important work and really interesting. So that's what's drawn me to public defender work. I think we play an important constitutional role in our adversary system, and it's really important work. So that's why I do what I do. And Alex?
Yeah, I think I'm sorry. I was trying to connect, and so I wish I could see who's in the audience. But in any event, my name is Alejandro Lockwood. I think real quick, I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela. I came to the U.S. Many years ago when I was 17, and definitely when I came to the United States, it was a dream of mine. So I guess I'm kind of an early dreamer, and I then went to school at the University of Illinois, where I graduated. I majored in geography and Latin American studies. And while I was at the University of Illinois, I began to think about how I could use my knowledge, my understanding in terms of helping people out. I think the fact that I'm bilingual is an asset. I have been a lawyer now for almost 29 years now, Andrea.
That's right.
And, so several decades ago, we did not have a lot of Spanish-speaking lawyers in the U.S. And my counselor encouraged me to enroll in law school. It wasn't something that I was planning. I was planning to pursue other career objectives, utilizing my degrees. And so, but I decided, my counselor told me, take the LSAT, give it a shot. I did that. Surprisingly enough, I scored surprisingly well. And then I applied to different law schools in the US, including the University of Minnesota, Minneapolis. And then I got in. I was surprised that I got in, but I did get in. And I remember the first year was really tough, was very difficult. And I think one thing that made it very difficult is that I am not a native I'm not a native English speaker. English is my second language. Sometimes I tell my kids, hey, you got to give me a break. And they tell me, well, Dad, I mean, you've been speaking English for several decades now, so you should know how to speak, And so the first year was tough because my English was good. I could write and I could obviously communicate effectively, but I think it was pretty rough having to compete with people who had advanced degrees. There were several people who were medical doctors, PhDs in philosophy or English, from really some pretty competitive universities. But you know what? I made it. During my second year of law school, I became fascinated by criminal law and criminal procedure. So I took advantage of clinics in which I actually got to represent clients in misdemeanor court. And I actually did both a prosecutor and a misdemeanor defense clinic. And that's when I got essentially hooked. From that point on, I thought, I made the decision during my second year of law school that if I graduated and I wanted to graduate from law school, that I would become a criminal defense attorney. Not only is it something where you're dealing with some of the most fundamental, important rights that a human being has. I think it's directly related to an aspect of human rights, but also civil rights, and all of these things that connect, poverty and the ability to hopefully become a spokesperson for those ones who do not have a voice, is something that motivated me and encouraged me to become a criminal defense attorney. So I got admitted. I got a job with the Wisconsin Public Defender, and I never forget that when they told me that I could be a public defender, I think it was one of the happiest moments of my life. It has been. I have absolutely no regrets about the things that I have done. as a public defender. I love every minute, every second of what I do, because it's something that I truly and intrinsically believe in. And so I am, like Andrea indicated, I'm a trial lawyer. Right now, I supervise a unit of lawyers. We represent individuals that have been committed to a secure facility because they are under some laws that we have here in Wisconsin, sexually violent persons. But I also represent individuals charged with sexual assaults, other serious felonies, for example, homicides. I have represented dozens of individuals charged with very serious offenses, where, you know, here in Wisconsin, the maximum possible penalty is life with no possibility of parole. And other things that I have done as a public defender or as a criminal defense attorney, I've had the opportunity to teach trial skills in many countries in Latin America. That has also been one of the best things that I have done in my life. You know, the opportunity to travel to places like Mexico to try to contribute in helping Mexican lawyers, judges, prosecutors, defense attorneys to understand how to try a case, and teaching them the basic skills of how to try a case, as Mexico right now, as many other countries in Latin America are now making the transition to a fully adversarial system in which people have the right to a trial, they have the right to be presumed innocent, the right to make the state or the government prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. Lawyers in most of the Latin American countries are now arguing cases in public, orally. And so I'm very proud that I've been part of a few lawyers here in the United States who have participated in Latin America in terms of helping them acquire some of the skills necessary to be able to have an effective criminal justice system. So that's it in a nutshell, some of the things that I do. Any questions?
Actually, I mean, either of you, if you could talk about specifically maybe how the career of a public defender progresses, because you're now experienced public defenders, but many lawyers come fresh out of law school like you did. And what are you likely to experience fresh out of law school, working your way up through to the positions where you're a supervisor, Andrea handles appeals? How do you move through the system? What are some of the things that you encounter as you come into public defense and especially working for a public defender?
So, I mean, the systems, can you hear me, Howie?
Yeah,
Hello?
I can hear you now. You were breaking up before, but now, and Alex, you were great. Your sound was coming in great. So let's hope that yours comes in now too, Andrea.
Okay, all right. I think it depends on what public defender system you're part of. You know, Wisconsin has a statewide public defender system, and so when we hire lawyers, you know, you're put in a specific office, and we have offices all around the state. And so it just depends on sort of the needs of the office. And ideally, when someone starts as a public defender, you would start out with less serious cases, misdemeanors, and you would work on those for a while until, you know, you start handling more serious cases. Other states, other countries, really not sure they have that, what I want to say, luxury, but you know, typically you would start with less serious cases, and there would be some sort of a mentoring system, and you would work your way up. In Wisconsin, we do, there's a training period, and you start with misdemeanors. Is that right, Alex, in your office? People typically start with misdemeanors?
Yes.
Still, was certainly what we started with. And you eventually work your way up to more serious cases. And the Milwaukee office, and Alex can speak to this, has a legal homicide unit, Alex, that handles only homicides, or is that spread out in the office?
Yes. Yeah, we have a homicide practice group of some of the most experienced lawyers in the office. I think one of the things about it, obviously, like Andrea indicated, first it was misdemeanor cases. I remember that I had a lot of, where I got my trial experience was trying domestic violence cases. Domestic violence are cases in which someone is accused of either engaging in disorderly conduct or battery or some other type of physical altercation with a domestic partner. And there's a lot of, obviously there's a lot of facts and drama involved. And usually these are cases that ended up going to trial. I remember my first year, I believe that I tried 5 cases my first year, which was kind of unusual in the sense that some of our cases can be resolved via plea bargaining. But I, was grateful that I got a chance to try several cases during my first year. And then obviously, as you gain more experience doing more complex criminal cases, such as cases involving drug trafficking, for instance, or drug dealing, robberies. So eventually you develop enough skills and enough experience that allows you to then participate or be part of the homicide practice group. One of the things about my first year in the public defender's office is that I was there was so much things to learn, not only to learn about the law, but about the way things actually take place in the courtroom, how to deal with judges and prosecutors. So there's one aspect in which you're dealing with the criminal law and the criminal procedure, and then the other aspect about managing the personalities of judges and prosecutors, and even your own colleagues, and then jurors. A lot of what we do is done in public, in which we actually have to speak. And I think that an important aspect of what we do as trial lawyers to be able to be persuasive, not only when we write something, but when we're actually saying something to another person. Because the vast majority of what I do is done in a public courtroom during an actual hearing in which people are listening. And so it's important to develop that skill. Andrea has other challenges because her the way that she persuades is through her writing, and sometimes through actual arguments that she would make before an appellate court or the Wisconsin Supreme Court or a federal district court or an appellate or a federal appellate court. And so there are different challenges in different, for an appellate and a trial lawyer. But for me, primarily is dealing with judges and prosecutors and jurors and witnesses. The vast majority of witnesses in our cases are police officers. So we have to learn how police officers work and how they think and how they testify. And so there are many different things that you have to be able to learn. So the first year, second year, the third year were really very intensive in the sense that we had to acquire a lot of information and then be able to put that information that we learn into practice.
Yeah, and that reminds me, Alex, when I think about the first years that we practiced, one of the things I remember is just the amount of motions that we bring, the motion practice, and what a learning curve there was with that in terms of, identifying issues in cases, and bringing those motions and litigating them and winning a fair amount of motions on illegal searches and seizures, on violations and whatnot. So there, your first few years as a lawyer, those things you're still learning, and you're raising those emotions before the court. And one of the things I was also thinking about that's changed in the time that we've practiced, as part of the suppression motion are the body cameras that police officers wear now in their job, and that's part of the practice of a criminal lawyer now, is you've got to review that body camera footage. So that comes sort of this. Any thoughts on that, Alex, and how that's changed your practice?
Hold on a second. I didn't hear you, Andrea. You were breaking up.
Uh-oh.
While you're kind of checking out your computer, I think one thing that maybe we should, one of the things that we should mention that we haven't yet is that there may be people in the audience. I see we have about 70 people. They may not know what a public defender is. We're all talking because the three of us know, and I interned with the public defender when I was in an undergraduate. I interned for 2 summers. So I'm familiar with, it was a long time ago, in the dark ages, but I'm familiar with some of the work. But for the people in the audience who may or may not know, a public defender is someone who is appointed by the state, paid for by the state. You're a defense attorney, and you represent indigent defendants, which basically means poor defendants. And so people who may be too poor to afford an attorney, and it may surprise you what the guidelines are. I don't know what they are in Wisconsin, but if you make even, a modest wage, you're probably not going to be able to use the public defender. You're going to have to hire your own attorney. So it's, but still, even with those low thresholds, most criminal defendants are represented by public defenders. And so just to kind of clarify that for the folks in the crowd, but also one of the questions, and maybe Andrea, you're ready to come back to your question, but one thing to keep in mind and maybe answer in just a little bit, the question I always get from students is, I don't think I could be a criminal defense attorney. How could I represent someone who's guilty? And so I know you're all blessed with having only innocent defendants, but if you can think about that answer too, and hopefully, Andrea, your internet will kind of clear up for us then too.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm not sure what's going on. Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you now,
but you break up every once in a while.
Okay, and I'm not sure what's causing that. Okay, all right. Yeah, and that's the question is something that Alex and I were talking about earlier that we get a lot. You get it from family members, and can you hear me? I'm just checking. Can you hear me?
You were breaking up a little bit, but you're back clear again. And in fact, when we'll look at the question, some people wanted you to repeat a couple things. So after you're done talking, I'll present the questions to you that some people had, because they said one of them wants to know what you were interested, what drove you to become a public defender.
Oh, goodness. Okay. Yeah. So, and just in terms of how you can, how we can represent people that we know are guilty or that are just,
You're really breaking up now.
Okay. I don't know.
We may have to turn it over to
Alex.
To Alex for right now. Sorry.
All right. So
sorry.
Hopefully I can give a succinct answer to this. I really, I'm going to say it the way I don't care. I mean, I don't care whether or not you're guilty or innocent. That's not. It's never bothered me. Has never been something that I know that people will, think about things. How can you represent someone who's accused of something terrible? But I think the functional word is accused. I think it's easy. I was talking to Andrea a little bit before we came online, and one of the things that comes easy to humans is to judge another person, and we're constantly judging other people. And then ultimately, it's very easy to accuse someone and to judge someone. But one of the things that distinguish us as a nation from other countries is the fact that we have a constitution, that we have a system that gives people the opportunity to be able to decide, to have a trial, and I believe. I really believe in that system. I do sincerely believe in the presumption of innocence and the obligation of the government or the state to prove someone's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. But usually I see what goes on when someone gets accused of a crime. It's an individual, it's a person, it's a human being who is entitled to certain considerations as a human being, as a person. I see it as a basic human right. When someone is accused of a serious crime where you could take someone's freedom, you can destroy someone's reputation. In fact, you can take someone's life in the United States or in places where the death penalty is imposed. So I've always believed that we have tools and instruments in order to protect that basic human right. And that happens through a process that we have here in the United States, which is a trial in which the state, the government, the police have to present evidence, and they have to persuade and convince someone beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest legal standard that we have in the US, to prove that someone has done something. So I see myself as an instrument of our Constitution, as an instrument of our of human rights, and I do not make judgments about people. I don't, ultimately, my client is the person who, in many circumstances, will decide to enter a plea, or a judge, if my client decides to be judged by a judge, or a jury. So it doesn't. I understand that there's some people who may find it difficult to understand this concept, but I think that that's what makes us different than any other system to some degree. And I will do anything. I will do anything, and I will go to any length to be able to protect and defend this institution that allows a person, a human being, to have the right to an attorney, to have the right to be presumed innocent, and the right to force the state to prove their guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. I think those are such important fundamental rights. And that is the reason why it doesn't matter. I do not care. I will represent anyone. I think the other example that I can give, which might not necessarily be the most apt comparison, is medical doctors in working in an emergency room, for instance. If a medical doctor working in an emergency room, his or her job is to attend, to save the life, or to take care of that person who comes into that room to receive medical services. The doctor isn't going to be questioning, okay, are you a good person? Are you a bad person? Were you accused of something? No, they don't do that. They do what they're supposed to provide a service. So I see myself in Andrea, and I believe she believes this too, that we see ourselves a lot like medical doctors and who are dealing sometimes with very difficult circumstances. And that's how I see the work that I do. And I'm very, very proud of the work that I do. And another thing too that I would like to add, that if the police and the prosecutors and the government do their job, if they gather evidence with integrity, if they follow the law, if they do the right thing, then they are going to be able to hopefully obtain a lawful and legal conviction and then punish the person who committed the offense. But if they don't, if they lie, if they are corrupt, if they are immoral, right, then the police should not be able to convict someone, because then we can't trust in the work that they do. And Andrea and I hope many public defenders and criminal defense attorneys in this country, we stand guard, to make sure that we don't have things like that, because one of the worst possible things that can happen is that an innocent person is convicted for a crime that he or she did not commit, or that someone gets punished excessively because someone did not present the proper arguments or do his or her job.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Alex. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hello?
Yep.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
I absolutely agree with Alex. I mean, ours is an adversarial system, and the only way it works is if we have a strong defense. And as Alex said, the government's got the burden of proof. It's a high burden of proof, and that's our system. And if we don't have a strong defense, the system doesn't work. So I'm very proud to be, able to represent my clients and, uphold the Constitution. And it's such an important part of our system that it's not going to work if you don't have a strong defense. So I don't have any, none of us, just because you're a public defender doesn't mean that you think crime is okay. It doesn't think that you mean that, or that you believe that people shouldn't be punished for criminal behavior. But it means that we value the Constitution. And as Alex said, if the prosecutor, if the police and the prosecutor do their job and do it fairly, a conviction is likely to happen. So, I don't view us as being obstructionist or as trying to prevent convictions where the prosecutor does their job, but we have a job to do as well.
Those are great answers, and I'm going to use them. I'm just going to play this video when the student asks me the next time. And Andrea, for some reason, if I leave my mic open and unmute it, you come in perfectly. So I don't know what so I'm going to leave it open. And so I'm hoping and praying that my dogs don't start barking in the middle of it, or there isn't something else. So we'll leave it open and see if that works. So
just don't breathe too hard.
Yeah, I'll also do that. We have a bunch of really good questions that came in, so I'm going to combine a couple. So if you're out there and you asked the first question, you asked it a while ago, I'm going to get to you, but there are a couple questions that kind of that play off your last answer. And those questions were, one person asked, and they said, well, Alex, you said you don't care if your client is guilty or not, but they said, do you ask them for details? Do you want to know all the details about the case? And that really, someone else asked a similar question, said, what kind of questions do you ask your client before, if we're not talking about appeals, but talking about the trial when they first come to you, or plea bargaining, whichever it might be?
Okay, so I think that one important aspect of what we do is, I want to be able, like I said, regardless of what my client is accused of, my job is to be able to represent that person to the best of my ability and to utilize every tool and knowledge that I have at my disposal so that I can ethically represent that person and do everything to make the state and the government prove the facts of that case. So I usually in the beginning, I have absolutely no interest. I never ask my client whether or not they did or didn't do it. That's not my job. What I do discuss with my client are the facts of the case. And one of the things that we have to do as part of being representing someone in a criminal case, we have to investigate the case. We have to see whether or not the state has sufficient and adequate evidence to prove the case. And if the evidence or the facts suggest or indicate that the state can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, then I present those facts to my client and I explain to my client, well, these are the facts. We also investigate the case and I give my client the results of the investigation. And then I give my client the option, these are the facts of the case. This is what the prosecutor is recommending in exchange for not going to trial. This is what the prosecutor is recommending. And then ultimately my client makes the decision as to whether or not they want to move forward with the trial or whether or not they want to accept the plea bargain. If the person makes a decision to accept the plea bargain, then I do ask the person why they have accepted the plea bargain, why they're entering a guilty plea. And then they tell me why they're doing that, why they're moving forward with that. If a client is telling me that, that they just simply want to get rid of the case and they're not, then that's something problematic, because I obviously do not want to be part of a system in which someone doesn't want to go to trial because they're afraid, that because we're not adequately prepared to go to trial, or something has failed in the way that we have represented our clients. So I do try to be incredibly careful to make sure that the person who's making the decision to enter a plea is a person who's making a decision in an intelligent way. They know all the facts, they know the pros and the cons of making, but it's up to my client ultimately to make that decision, not my decision.
Yeah, and one thing just to take off on that, Alex, I would agree. I mean, normally that's not something we would ask our client, did you do this or not? That's not our job. We're not the fact finders. We're not the judge. And that the other thing is that that can hamper you then in presenting your case, because we do have ethical obligations. We can't present perjured testimony. And so, for example, if you had a client that said, it told you, I did this, I did exactly what they said, but I'm going to get up on the stand at trial and I am going to, I want to present an alibi, we'd be constrained, and we can't present perjured evidence or evidence we know is perjured to the court. So that could box us in a little bit. So there, you don't necessarily want to know, typically from your client, whether or not they admit they did it, unless they're entering a guilty plea and they tell you they want to do that because they did it and they want to take, advantage of the offer. So that, whether or not they did it, Alex is right, is not really we're not the investigators, we're not the police, we're not trying to find that out. We're trying to defend them to the best of our ability and present their options. And as Alex said, investigate the case, figure out what the state's case looks like so that we can then advise them, give them our advice on what we think is the likely outcome of a trial and whether they should pursue, the best plea bargain we can get, or whether they have a good shot at a trial. So that's what our role is advising our client, not determining whether or not they actually did the thing that they're accused of.
We have a question I want to get to because there are a couple other questions and you can look at them if you just click on Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. But we have one that's someone's been waiting patiently for almost 20 minutes. So let me get to his question. The question was, is there anything, now that you've had a couple of decades of experience, is there anything that you now know that you wish you knew at the beginning of your career? If you could go back, what are some of the things that experience has taught you that you would like, that you pass along? Maybe another way to ask it is that you pass along to young public defenders or someone in this crowd, because the person who asked the question is thinking about becoming a public defender. And I can maybe, while you're thinking about that, add a couple other questions that are here that relate to it. Do these cases take a emotional toll on you? Are there any cases that really stick with you?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there is a thing in public defender work. It's called, post, what do they call it, Alex? Secondary stress syndrome, where, we absorb a lot of, from the cases we see, there's a lot of gruesome cases.
Fatigue.
Passion fatigue, thank you. We absorb a lot from what we see in our cases, just the gruesome nature of some of the cases, the autopsy photos, the crime scenes, but beyond that, even just in representing our clients, there are a lot of broken lives. And so listening to and getting to know our clients in order to be able to effectively represent them, you really have to kind of dive deep into their lives and, learning about some of the things that they have been through and that they've had to deal with. You kind of carry those with you and you think about those when you're, done with your day. So it does take a toll on you. Again, we've been doing this for a long time. You have to find ways not to carry that home with you every night, and to find your joy in other places. But it's incredibly rewarding work. I would not have wanted to have done anything else for all these years. For all of my lawyer friends that went into other areas of practice, I have to say that I don't know anyone outside of public defender work that is as excited about what they've done all these years as I am and my colleagues are that have stuck with it all these years. So, but it does take its toll. Some people do leave the practice, after a period of time because it is very stressful. And it also doesn't pay a lot, right, Alex?
Correct. We've always been complaining about that, but
yeah. If you're looking
about it,
if you're looking for a job that a law job that pays a lot of money, public defender work is probably not it. But we have great colleagues. That's one thing I can say for sure. We have great colleagues because you have a common cause. And so, your colleagues tend to be people that, they believe in the Constitution and they believe in the fight and they believe in providing good representation. So there's a lot of camaraderie among you and your colleagues. There's a lot of coming back from court or talking about cases and people
people exchanging ideas and encouraging you. And so in terms of a work environment, it's been a great work environment. Would you agree, Alex?
Yes, I do agree. Yes, for instance, I think you guys, I told you guys that I represented people accused of very serious homicides, and they also include the homicides of children. I mean, I have 3 kids, and it would be, I wouldn't be genuine if I said that they didn't affect me. It does have an impact on me, but I also believe enough in our system of law and in what I told you guys about those basic human rights, such as the right to have an attorney and the right to be presumed innocent, that I also believe in that right, so that I can put that aside and be able to represent my client to the best of my ability. And, you know, and then ultimately what I see is another human being. Usually when we see our clients, you know, number one, they're in jail. They're powerless. Some of them are afflicted or suffering from sometimes serious psychiatric issues and problems. Sometimes they have been essentially abandoned by society, their parents, their families. Some of them have suffered significant amount of trauma. And so when I finally I see a human being that is absolutely vulnerable and alone, and I can't, this is part of me that tells me that I can't just ignore that. And so that's where this other part of me, this compassionate, hard part of me comes into play. And then I can deal with some of the other things that I get to see, which are sometimes very, very hard to see.
Very good. We have, I can answer one question that's no longer showing up. The question was, have you handled a death penalty case? And if you've been in Wisconsin the whole time, Wisconsin hasn't had the death penalty since what, the 1800s? I think something.
Okay,
like
but let me make a correction.
Go ahead, yeah.
Now, I have to make a correction because a lot of people say Wisconsin doesn't have it, but you know what? We do have it. Through the federal, there was a President Bill Clinton signed into law what is known as the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act, in which people can be sentenced to die if the Attorney General of the United States requests the imposition of the death penalty. And we have 2 federal district courts in Wisconsin, one in Milwaukee and the other one in Madison. They have not yet tried or requested the use of the federal death penalty, but it's President Trump has asked, and in fact, the previous Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, did ask U.S. attorneys' offices all over the United States to begin applying and asking for the death penty. So
but that's federal, Alex. So we don't deal with. Yeah, we at the state level.
When someone says that it is practically all over the U.S.
Yeah,
but not in terms of state crimes, federal crimes.
Yeah, the most severe penalty in Wisconsin is life without parole, which I've had clients that have told me they would have preferred the death penalty, frankly. So it's life without parole is not it's not insignificant by any means.
Okay. We have about 3 questions that all kind of say the same thing, but in different ways. What are the biggest obstacles that you face as a public defender? And maybe you can even include in that, because a couple of the other questions ask about the size of your caseloads. So I'm guessing that might be one of the obstacles.
Yeah, absolutely. The caseload, and particularly, I mean, Alex can speak to that even more. Our trial office has a larger caseload than the Appellate Division does, simply because appeals are a much deeper dive. So we have fewer cases. I mean, it is still a significant caseload. But we have fewer cases because we have to read through everything that has happened, all of the transcripts, and there's a significant amount of research and writing that's involved in prepping an appeal. So the trial lawyers have a much higher caseload. They're in court every single day. So that is probably the biggest challenge, and lack of, which goes along with lack of resources. I mean, we're fortunate in that we do, in the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office, have a budget for experts. All the offices have investigators that investigate our cases, so the lawyers don't have to do that. We have social workers that help develop sentencing memorandums and do other things. So we do have a small budget for those things, but it's not nearly enough for the amount of cases that we handle. So I'd say resources and the caseload, and again, the low pay. I mean, right now, one of the biggest problems is the attrition. Just people coming, starting, and then leaving after a few years. And so just as you get, lawyers who are trained and able to take the more serious cases, they leave, and often for the caseload and low pay issues. So that's a significant challenge. Alex, can you think of anything else?
Okay, yeah, I want to tell you another significant challenge that we have right now, and is for some reason, this country in the last few years, it's like there's this pendulum that swings back and forth in terms of, politicians making moral judgments about what, how to implement tougher laws and punishing people. And that is also another obstacle, the fact that sometimes we have a political environment that is not based on reason or logic, but is based on racism, race, and poverty. Is based on prejudice. It's not based on what we now call evidence-based decision-making. So that if you are saying, okay, we have to, how can we go about protecting the public, and how can we do this? And the best way that we can achieve this by putting people in jail, in prison, and throwing everyone away. And the truth of the matter is that's not the best way to keep our country safe. There's so many other things that we can do right now to be able, for instance, that eventually will have a much better impact on whether or not people become engaged in crimes, such as working on eliminating poverty, unemployment, providing people health care for everyone, for the poor, ending homelessness, addressing trauma in terms of kids that have been physically abused or sexually abused when they were children. There's so many things that we can implement right now, but I think one of the obstacles that we have right now is that we really have this tough on crime morality, which is absolutely idiotic and unreasonable, and it does not make us safe, and it makes our job so much more difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, one other thing I would say is, that's challenging in the work as a public defender is you lose a lot. So you that can get to be a little defeating unless you're able to redefine your idea of what success is. If you stick with the idea that, well, I've got to win a trial in order to be successful, you're going to be very disappointed. So, I've had to redefine and maybe that's something that I would think about telling a new lawyer that's coming into the office that I didn't realize when I started this, is it's not about just winning cases. That's great. That is, as a trial lawyer, that is the most fun thing, is to win a trial. But a win can also be, especially in a case that is not a good trial case, is to get a great plea bargain for your client where their exposure, their incarceration exposure is limited. And sometimes, a lot of times, it's just having the client feel like, or tell you that they feel like they've been heard. Because I view a significant part of our job as being our client's voice. And there is almost always two sides to a story. So something that may look very cut and dried in the beginning, when you get to know your client and get to know what, from their perspective, what happened, or how they viewed things, and what's happened in their life. I view that as my job to educate the court and, in my trial days, the jury, as to my client's viewpoint on what happened. So sometimes success is just having the client feel like their lawyer was someone that cared about what happened to them, and told their story, even if the outcome is not what you would have hoped it was going to be. Because sometimes our clients haven't had anybody in their lives that they ever felt cared about them or was willing to listen to what they had to say. So your definition of success, I think, is something that you have to kind of redefine when you're a public defender, because we lose a lot.
And that was the perfect segue, because the questions, a couple of questions were unanswered, were about losing. And another point that somebody made, someone asked, how do you feel when you lose a case? But another student or participant asked, what happens if you know you're going to lose the case, and maybe the prosecutor is offering you a good deal, but your client doesn't want to take it, and they want to go to trial because they've seen everybody on TV. You can pull a mystery witness out of your hat, and suddenly they'll be found not guilty, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So what do you do in that case when you know they're going to lose if they go to trial and you've got a pretty good deal?
A lot of that is client education, client management, I think, and trying to get the client around to seeing, the realism of it. And Alex, you can talk about your experience and how you educate your clients, but it's either providing them with the police reports, going over the body cam with them, and talking about what the state's evidence is, the medical reports, the DNA reports, their confession, if they confessed. Sometimes you'll have clients who confess that still believe that they have a good shot at winning a trial. So it's going over the evidence with them, I think. And sometimes, if, of course, with their permission, it's talking with their family to get the family to see how unrealistic their expectation is, and that there is a favorable offer that you believe, they should seriously consider and take. But at the end of the day, that's one of the rights that is entirely the client's, is whether or not they are going to they want to take it to trial. The trial right is theirs. And so if they, reject your advice, I make sure I document the file, because if they lose, or when they lose, they will be unhappy. And you want to make sure that, you've documented. But it's client education and client management. And a lot of it's getting the client's trust too. I mean, that's the important thing about the client relationship, is the more time you spend with them, if they trust you, they are more likely to rely on your advice. But that's another hurdle we have with many of our clients, is just their distrust of the justice system, and they view us as part of that. So it's overcoming almost from the get-go. When you walk in the room and first meet with them, they are immediately distrustful of you. So it's trying to win them over and make them understand that you are there to represent them and their interest. So the client management and client relationship is really important in public defender work. Alex?
Yeah, I lost you guys for a second. Something happened with my iPad. So what was the question?
Well, maybe. Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you have the question was, if your client has a really good deal and they're going to lose if you go to trial and probably get what we call a jury penalty from the judge, they may get a worse sentence, but they still are adamant that they want to go to trial. What do you do in that situation?
I do what my client tells me. I do discuss. Sometimes I bring another lawyer in my office, so the client can see or hear a different perspective. But then ultimately, if the person wants to go to trial, we go to trial. I've lost cases where the prosecutor made a recommendation where my client would have been able to get out in probably less than 5 years. And then the client made the decision to go to trial and got convicted of a very serious felony, and then ended up being convicted of an offense that carries life imprisonment. I mean, it's really, really difficult, but then it's ultimately my client's decision to make, not mine.
Okay. Well, some of the questions that remain, and some of them have been, I don't know if the person removed them or not, but I'll still ask them. One is that's still up on the board is, how do you stay composed in the courtroom? Well, maybe when things go against you. But related to that, someone also asked, are trials really as dramatic as they seem on TV? And I would add one thing to it. Not only how do you stay composed in the courtroom, but what are some of when you were litigators, were you excited about a trial? I know, we keep focusing on trials, but most of the cases are a plea bargain. Do you get excited when a legitimate trial comes along where you think, yeah, this is a case I really need to take to trial. I'm not going to plead it out. I'm going to go to trial.
Okay.
So all of those kinds of things about trial, your experience in the trial.
All right. So no,
setting.
I don't stick. There's times in which I lose it. And that's just because of who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be somebody that I'm not. And sometimes if I feel that an injustice is taking place, I will say something. I will raise my voice. I try to control myself, but ultimately I do what I believe is right. Of course, I'm not going to swear at people. I'm not going to use profanity. I'm not going to be inconsiderate of other people, but I'm going to be who I am. I'm not going to pretend to be a different person. So the other issue is in terms of whether or not I look forward to going to trial. I get sick. I remember the first few trials I would throw up. It was, because it's the life, the liberty, the reputation of a person in my hands. It is my responsibility to do the best possible job that I can. And I care about the work that I do. And so, yeah, physically, that part of going to trial is not easy. Now, when the trial gets started, once the trial is in progress, I'm able to concentrate and focus. And usually, what I tell people when I teach trial skills is to exercise, to learn how to relax, how to breathe. And sometimes I do that in order to control my nerves and my emotions. But once the trial is in progress, it seems that there's a part of us or a part of me that the rational part of me that takes control, and I'm able to get it done. And what I can tell you is that once I'm in trial, I love every second of it. I got to tell you, the best part of the trial is cross-examining witnesses, especially police officers who are liars, who lie. And I can catch them lying, and I can cross-examine them and impeach them. And the other part that I really, really enjoy is making a closing argument, because it's the moment in which we can actually try to convince and persuade the jury, or to convince maybe one or two people in that jury as to why our clients are not guilty. But yeah, it's for me, I still get it. I mean, and one of the things that I tell people is the day that I don't have that feeling, that apprehension about going to trial, then it's the day that I will quit being a public defender and I'll do something else with my life. Because that tells me that I care about the work that I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right in terms of Alex's discussion about how he feels physically sick, because when I did trial work, I would feel that way as well. And I think almost every trial lawyer you talk to, even the really experienced ones, will tell you that even after years of doing trials, they still feel really hyped up, really nervous before a trial. But once you get into it, and it's the same for me for oral arguments in front of the Court of Appeals and the Wisconsin Supreme Court, getting ready for the argument is, harrowing. But once you get up there, it's pretty fun, actually. I mean, and the preparation, I mean, I like to be really prepared, and that helps you maintain your composure, and you feel like you're ready to go and, either for me, answer questions from the justices, or for Alex in terms of cross-examination and making your closing argument and being able to, prepared to deal with the witnesses, but it's preparation. So, but it is when the lead up to it can be, pretty daunting, but once you're in it, it's a lot of fun. Otherwise, I don't think we'd continue to do it if it wasn't still fun.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Andrea is saying about being prepared. Because if you're prepared, and sometimes it's just part of your own experience, you know, especially if you have, I think I cross-examined, I don't know, thousands of witnesses. And I think, and I'm not saying that I'm an expert, because I keep learning better ways of doing this, but I think your experience and your preparation kicks in, even though you don't think it, then, but it does. So it's really important to be prepared. Great.
And one of the questions that it's no longer showing up on the board, there's still one more that we'll get to it. So whoever asked that, Avery, we'll get to your question in just a second. But when you were talking about client trust, your relationship with your client is so important. How, someone asked this earlier and I never got to it. How does being bilingual help with that trust? Because I'm imagining, especially in Milwaukee, other cities, you're going to have some folks who English may not be their first language. And so how has that helped you? For students out there who are thinking about going to law school, and they're wondering, you know, should I learn a language or not? How important?
You know what? If you learn a language, especially Spanish, because we have a significant number of Spanish-speaking people here in the United States who need good lawyers, not only in criminal law, but in family law, in labor law, contract law, real estate. I mean, in any discipline of the law, we definitely need Spanish-speaking lawyers, and it is an asset to be able to have a conversation, even though we have in Wisconsin and also in the federal system, we have really good interpreters, people who are experts in translating from Spanish into English and vice versa. We're really proficient in the work that they do. But in terms of having that personal communication with my client face to face, it is definitely an asset to be able to understand their language. Another thing too, if you're in trial, you can also, if you have a witness that is, especially for me, if you have a witness that is Spanish speaking, you can also see and hear, you know, even though what that witness is testifying to is being translated into English, you can hear, you know, the person speaking Spanish. And so it's definitely an important asset. And I would like to encourage anyone to learn a second language. I keep telling my kids that, and they don't want to listen to me.
That's normal.
But anyway, so.
So normal. No, I'd agree with Alex. I mean, I speak a little bit of Spanish, but not nearly enough to speak to my clients in Spanish. And you get an interpreter for the clients that don't, or that English is not their first language, but it adds another person. I do think it's a big asset to be able to speak Spanish directly to your client in their native language, just in terms of establishing the trust.
And we have one question remaining on the board, and that's basically asking, do you see the trend, do you see sentences trending more towards longer incarceration or just incarceration period? Or do you see the system trying to use more alternative sanctions? I mean, what do you really see as the direction of punishment in essence?
Well, I think the direction that I'm seeing right now is in this this concept called evidence-based decision making. So even though we're still seeing irrational criminal law legislation, I think that the cost of incarcerating people is a burden on governments, on the state, and then ultimately we're finding out that it does not in any way, shape, or form keep the community safe. So I think we're moving into a model in which we are trying to make decisions in a more rational and smart way, as opposed to just letting, I don't know, our emotions get caught in the way. Although I have seen For instance, when people are accused of offenses that involve child sex abuse or child pornography, I have seen that the type of cases are becoming, the punishment for those type of cases are becoming increasingly more punitive, more, the penalties are very, very high in cases like that, which then there's another issue too, like, especially if someone is accused of a sexual assault, especially if it's a sexual assault involving a child, that the penalties are so incredibly high. I mean, they go all the way from minimum mandatory sentences of 3, 5, 25 years, all the way to life in imprisonment. And sometimes individuals who are, factually innocent may feel compelled to enter into a plea bargain in order to avoid having to go to a trial and then convicted of a crime and then having to serve a minimum mandatory sentence. So it's kind of a mixed situation right now.
I mean, I think that nationally we're moving towards less, more treatment-based and alternatives to incarceration. But my feeling is Wisconsin is behind the times. Personally, as Alex alluded, there have been recent laws that have been passed adding additional minimum mandatory penalties for everything from child porn to OWIs to drunk drivings to I think there was even a retail theft, like a repeat retail theft or something, that they were adding a minimum mandatory sentence to. And, what's driving nationally, I think, is, as Alex alluded to, the cost. It's like $30,000 a year to incarcerate someone in Wisconsin prisons. And it's just, that kind of money outlay for when you balance that against what the real safety is, because people are eventually coming out. They are eventually coming out into the community. And so, that's when the real question is of trying to maximize the safety, is when people are released from prison. But when you're incarcerating people at $30,000 a person a year, that's a lot of money. And I don't think in many cases for nonviolent offenders it justifies the cost, and there could be other ways. But I think Wisconsin particularly is behind the times on that.
The Philadelphia DA, I don't know if he's still doing it, but he was a former defense attorney, and when he became DA, he instituted a policy that all of his assistant DAs, when they ask for a long sentence, have to do a cost-benefit analysis before so this is the prosecutor is forcing his assistant DAs to actually do a cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, they should seek a shorter sentence. So, you do see some of these changes around the country. Well, we've taken you over time. I do want to put in one quick plug, and I'm sorry, Alex, because I'm going to plug the University of Wisconsin Law School, where Andrea and I both went. That all of you potential lawyers out there are thinking about law schools. If you don't want to take a bar exam, Wisconsin is the last state in the country that doesn't have, or that has, the diploma privilege, which means that if you go to Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin or Marquette, and you take the basic courses everyone takes, about a month after graduation, you go through a swearing-in ceremony without taking a bar exam, and you become a member of the State Bar of Wisconsin. And then you march down to the federal courthouse and you become a member of the federal bar. So Andrea and I have never experienced, have you taken any other state?
No.
So we've never experienced a bar exam, and so we laugh at our colleagues. And sorry, Alex, you had a.
It's okay, because in the beginning I hated everyone from Wisconsin that went to law school. Not really. But yeah, I forgot to tell people that the bar exam, my entire summer was ruined because of it, and so. Because of you guys.
Yeah, we were having drinks and everything else.
Yeah, and I would also like to put in a plug for our agency. So students that are interested in law school, apply to University of Wisconsin Law School, graduate, and you won't have to take the bar, as Howie said. And then if you're interested in public defender work, apply to the Wisconsin Public Defender's Office, because we really do. We have a great public defender program. You know, it's better than many in the country. It's statewide, and it's been a great career for us.
Well, it's clear just from having you two, you can expect a call from me again, because I'm going to ask you to come into classes and speak through Zoom, because this has been fantastic. And
Well, thank you.
you've
Great.
represented the Public Defender's Office very well. And so I hope that you've attracted some recruits for the future. And so I'll let you have the last words, as you should. You can have the closing arguments, and we'll say goodnight.
All right. Well, thanks for everybody for listening, and I hope it's been informative at least, and might have inspired some of you potentially. But thanks, Howie, for inviting us.
Okay, real quick, I just, one thing that has been obviously, we're going through, our nation right now is going through probably one of the most difficult periods of our lives. I mean, I don't ever remember what's going on right now, not only in my lifetime, but my parents' lifetime. And so I think that I would like everyone to be safe, but more importantly too, is to make sure that during this time that we don't lower our guard in terms of, you know, usually when moments like this happen in a country, either we can make improvements in the way that we treat the poor, that we treat disadvantaged people, or we could do something different and start taking away fundamental basic rights. And so I just simply want everyone, I mean, because my audience is a lot of young people out there, just don't let that happen. I certainly will do whatever I can to remain vigilant, and I know Andrea too, as well as many other lawyers and public defenders and civil rights lawyers across the nation. But we have to watch out, we have to be vigilant, and I hope that everyone understands that. I hope that this situation will get better soon. But you know, let's just be out there, be safe, and make sure that we treat everyone with decency and respect.
Well said.
Thank you, everyone.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you, Andrea.
Thank
Thank you, Alex. And
Thank you.
Thanks to everyone who attended tonight. It was a great time. Thank you.
Take care.
You too. Bye.
Be safe.